You're here for your medication consultation. Let's go. So this is the art of fine-tuning ADHD medications. It really is an art. You'll see why. The goals of medication treatment for ADHD are to increase dopamine to the prefrontal cortex, regulate the effects of norepinephrine. And stimulants are first-line treatment for this, unless contraindicated. So we have amphetamines, and in this class of drugs, we have Adderall and Dexedrine, long-acting and immediate release. There's Vyvanse, which is a long-acting prodrug. What that means is there's a little added molecule of L-lysine onto that amphetamine, which makes it so that it has to be in your digestive tract for it to work. You cannot shoot it up or snort it. That's why a lot of doctors like this, because it's very difficult to abuse it. And amphetamines work both by getting more dopamine to be released from the sending neuron, as well as blocking the uptake of it back into the sending neuron. And it also works a bit on norepinephrine. Methylphenidates, under this category, we have Ritalin, Focalin, Concerta. These are the brand names that maybe you've heard of. There's long-acting and immediate release of all of these as well. Methylphenidates work really more by just blocking that reuptake vacuum pump that sucks the dopamine back out of the synapse between the neurons back into the one that sent it there in the first place. And why stimulants are first choice is because they are incredibly effective, very safe, and well tolerated when properly dosed. If you give everyone with ADHD a stimulant medication, either amphetamine or methylphenidate, 80% of them, so the two bigger pieces of pie together, will respond well. If you then give all of those people the opportunity to try the other molecule, let's say you started with Adderall, now you get to try Ritalin, the number of people that respond well to stimulants goes up to 90%. That's huge. That's so effective. And then within the group of people who do respond well to stimulants, about 60% of them will be basically normalized while the stimulant is in their system. And this other group, this other 40% of the effective group, it helps, but it's not quite the magic bullet. And how they work is they get more dopamine to the prefrontal cortex. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter associated with how we notice a reward and then take motor activation towards it. It is the green light from the brain to the body to go and do something that will result in all kinds of feel-good chemicals like endorphins, oxytocin, and things like that. So the dopamine we're trying to target here in the prefrontal cortex is the molecule that helps us choose to do the right things at the right time. And so this increases the perception of reward in doing things. And if you operate with a lot of dread for things that are repetitive, boring, mundane, involve multiple steps, the important but uninteresting tasks, which a lot of life is, then you experience a lot of dread. So dopamine stimulants help reduce some of that dread. And they also help pump the brakes on notice everything, react to everything, feel everything, which is what ADHD brains are naturally driven to do. A lot of people call ADHD the diabetes of mental health. It is chronic. ADHD is with you every day. And really, it should be treated every day. You need executive function to make good decisions all the time. Honestly, you probably should be medicated if you're going to be behind the wheel, right? And no one insulin dose for people with diabetes, there's no one medication, dose, route, or timing for ADHD meds. It's very similar in that way. They need a similar level of fine-tuning. Well, how do you know if your medications are working for you, if they're finely tuned for you? By keeping track. You have to use some kind of tracking tool. It is actually key, really, to managing ADHD, especially in the beginning, in the early days. And that's really because of poor working memory. You're just not going to be a good representer of your history and experience with them. So we need an objective system for our experience with medications so that we can make good decisions about dosing. And this is not forever, but for the first few weeks to months. And sometimes we do some titration and we get to a dose and things are really working well. And maybe about 8 months later or something, and you start to think like, I don't know if this medication is working anymore. And you reach out to us. We might tell you, pull out the log and log for a few days and see, is it working? And it's just not working on the things that it's not going to help with, which we're about to see, right? What you are going to log and when. Ideally, you would log about an hour after a dose, probably around lunchtime. about dinner time, and then around bedtime. And what we want to know is, when does it start working? When does it wear off? What is it helping with? And what side effects are you experiencing? With regard to side effects, as the dose increases, side effects usually do too. And with time, those side effects should decrease. The other thing to know that you will experience with side effects is that they will be more prominent when the drug is entering your brain and when it is exiting your brain. So within an hour of a dose, and then towards the end of the duration of action of that dose. And choosing target symptoms. So ADHD stimulant medications specifically, work well on a few things, but not everything. So sure, they will help with sustained engagement, the ability to focus on something, be motivated to start things, finish things, right? And a sense of well-being, honestly, because if you have less dread associated with all of the things that you have to do every day, then you don't feel like the world is a terrible place. We're not shooting for euphoria here. We're just shooting for doing things, and it's not terrible, right? Reduce procrastination, of course, like reduce anxiety along with that, because if you've been using procrastination to take advantage of anxiety as a motivator to get stuff done, hopefully we can reduce that. And then reduce impulsivity, allow you to pump the brakes on things and stop and think. And then sleep. Sleep is a maybe, maybe not. It's hard to know. It is actually rare that stimulant medications interfere with sleep in an ADHDer. Most clients find that once they start taking their ADHD medication every day, in about roughly the same window of time, so between 6 and 8 a.m. for most people, they start to sleep better. Honestly, it's really about, if your dopamine is regulated more often, then you are more regulated, and it is in a pattern that is kind of mirroring what the rest of the world experiences. So your dopamine is coming online in the morning as the sun is coming up, and then it's tapering off in the evening, allowing the melatonin to come back up. That is a process that is impacted in ADHD from a genetic standpoint. Our circadian rhythm is delayed on average by 2 hours. So stimulants can actually help with this. And some people even need a stimulant dose to go to bed, to turn off the cognitive hyperactivity and all the thoughts. Things that are not going to respond well to stimulants. Rejection sensitivity. Stimulants don't help with this, but we do have other medications that do help. Memory. Maybe, maybe not. If you're a little bit better to have sustained engagement and focused attention, perhaps you are storing more things in memory, but this is more of an indirect effect. Cognitive hyperactivity. Maybe, maybe not. Some people, when they start their stimulant, really find that their brains quiet down, and they feel a sense of calm that they've never felt before. Not everyone experiences that. We do have other medications that help with this, and they are the same ones that help with rejection sensitivity, though. Sense of time. There's no pill for that. There's no pill for organization or prioritization. And then sleep. Stimulants may not help sleep. It just depends on the person, and this is a trial and error thing. So finding the right dose, it is all about titration. We need to start low and go slow. We're going to go up gradually until we hit a dose that is either no more effective than the previous dose, or we hit side effects that just don't resolve. Right? So we want to find the dose of medication that keeps you in this green therapeutic window for as long as the drug says that it should, like the manufacturer says that it should. For instance, immediate release Adderall is actually intermediate release. So the manufacturer says an immediate release dose of Adderall should last anywhere between 6 and 8 hours. So if we give you 5 milligram Adderall tablet and you take it at 8 a.m. and about 8:30 or 9, you can tell I'm doing things and I don't feel like the world is terrible. And then about 2 hours later, you're thinking, I don't feel it anymore and everything is bleh. Well, that dose is too low. Let's say Vyvanse, for instance. Vyvanse should last 8 to 12 hours. So again, if we start at 20 milligrams of Vyvanse and you've taken your dose and about 6 hours later, you're tanking. Maybe you feel weepy, which is often a symptom of what's called rebound, where the stimulant is leaving your brain, and so there's some rebound effects there. So we can only keep going up so far on the dose to extend the time that drug is going to last for you. And most adults need to function for longer than 12 hours of their day. So you can see how, okay, well now what we're going to maybe do is bring in a second dose later in the day to head this ski slope off at the pass before it dubs down into the yellow. We want to hit that maybe about 3/4 of the way down or halfway down the slope in the green, so that we keep you up in that sort of peakish area of the therapeutic window for as long as you need to function, and do so without interfering in your sleep. And this is just kind of a dance. So here is the tracking tool in the workbook that I've provided. On page 30, we have the target symptoms. So you want to put down the date, the dose, the time you took it. If you notice it kicked in, some people don't really notice. We're not shooting for that boom, right? We just want to, oh yeah, I'm functioning. And then the wear off time, and then the target symptoms. It doesn't really matter if we have chosen Adderall or Ritalin or Concerta or Focalin or Dexedrine or Vyvanse. The potential for all of these side effects are included in any single one of those. So they all have the potential to have agitation, restlessness, tremor, decrease your appetite, maybe some headache, irritability, dry mouth, insomnia, stomach upset, muscle pain and stiffness, and bruxism. Bruxism is jaw clenching, teeth grinding, or just like feeling like your shoulders are stuck to your earlobes. And some of these will be transient and dose related. Some stick around, some are deal breakers, and some are not. So, for instance, if you have taken a dose of Adderall and you feel like you have run a marathon, your muscles are so sore and so stiff, that's a deal breaker. That tells us that is not the drug for you. So then we would probably try a methylphenidate. Appetite, usually that gets better after a while. And even if it doesn't, that's not a deal breaker necessarily. If that drug is helping you so much, it's life-changing, but you struggle to eat, well then we're just going to really put in some efforts to help you remember to eat. We're going to schedule food and things like that. Dry mouth, that just kind of sticks around, and well then maybe it just reminds you to drink water. And then bruxism, the grinding of the teeth. Same scenario here where, okay, let's say we try Adderall, and the amphetamines seem to be a little bit more associated with the bruxism. And Adderall works really well for you, but you are grinding your teeth to nubs. So, okay, let's try methylphenidate. Let's say we try Concerta, and you feel terrible on Concerta. Just absolutely terrible, and it's really not helping. So maybe we go back to the Adderall, and perhaps we bring in a second class of medications that can help address that type of side effect. So this is how we're going to track side effects. This is page 31 in the workbook. Other things to consider about what could impact the effectiveness of your medications. Did you eat breakfast before you take your meds? This might be something to experiment. You may need to try taking it with or without food, despite what it says on the bottle. And in terms of the amphetamines, so Vyvanse, Adderall, or Dexedrine, we need to avoid taking those with a glass of orange juice or other foods that are really high in vitamin C or acidic, because this will cause the drug to be pulled out of the bloodstream and into the bladder in the urine when the urine is more acidic, and then you will pee that drug out. So that will reduce the amount of time that the stimulant will work for you. But I think that pretty much you can prevent this by staying hydrated or just being consistent with your diet. If a glass of orange juice every morning makes life worth living, well then we would just, dose adjust for that particular lifestyle critical factor. And stimulants can deplete some nutrients like potassium, iron, vitamin D, zinc, and magnesium. So we probably are good candidates for a good quality multivitamin. And when I say good quality, I mean look for one that is GMP or Good Manufacturing Practices certified, or USP certified, or both. USP means that the company has hired a third party to come in and certify that what they say is in that pill is actually in there and in the right quantities and nothing else. So taking your microbiome into consideration could be something that we need to consider because the gut-brain axis, there's so much exploding in the research about this right now. And again, we're here at a chicken or egg scenario We don't know if is it because you don't have a certain number of microbial species in your gut that causes the genetic changes associated with ADHD, or is it the other way around? It's so fascinating. We're in a really interesting time with the research. But what they are seeing is that there's definitely differences in the guts of people with ADHD and autism. And a probiotic and a prebiotic supplement taken along with your stimulant medication does tend to make that stimulant more effective. So please do consider a prebiotic or a probiotic, especially if you have any digestive issues whatsoever. And if we are bumping up against, or maybe you've already bumped up against, having a lot of trouble finding the right medications, or perhaps you've had a lot of atypical reactions to medication, we might want to consider getting a psychopharmacogenomics panel. We don't typically jump to doing this. So psychopharmacogenomics is we can test your genes with a swab on your cheek, and we can see how your body metabolizes a lot of different medications. Most of the psychiatric medications, some blood thinners, some pain medications, and several others, statins and things like that. And we also can see some other things, such as how your body processes folic acid, which is critical for building neurotransmitters, how your body clears out the junk dopamine that, we can't really use it anymore. We do recycle neurotransmitters in the synapse, but just like plastic, you can't keep recycling it over and over again. After a while, it will degrade. And so we need a way to get rid of the garbage neurotransmitters. And some people have a difficult time doing that. But we don't typically jump to do this right away because the markers for how we process the stimulants are not as strong as they are for all the other medications. And so it's not really something that we need to have before we start stimulant medication. And these are not free, and often they're not covered by insurance. They are covered by Medicaid, interestingly, but otherwise they tend to be about $400 out of pocket. But they can give us very useful information if needed. Include MTHFR and other polymorphisms, which I was just talking about with how we process folic acid and then how we clean out the junk neurotransmitters in our synapses. And then there's menstrual cycle and ADHD. So if you are a female person who has ovaries and has a menstrual cycle still, that is likely going to have an impact on the effectiveness of your stimulant medication during your luteal phase. So that would be after ovulation till the first day of the menstrual cycle starting again. And some people, there will be a difference in the stimulant medication's effectiveness. Some people need to go up on their stimulant medication during those 10 to 12 days, 10 to 14 days. Some people need to go down. And really the only way we can know how to approach this and how to deal with this is if you do experience this phenomenon where it's like 2 weeks out of the month, you're like, yeah, this is working great. And then another 2 weeks, you're like, it's like I didn't take it. Well, we need to use a workbook and try to track that so we can figure out how to deal with it. And I have one. We have one for you. And then there's the whole health wheel of ADHD. And this is at the back of your workbook that I provided you. This is where we need to look at all of the things that could be contributing to your physiology and what could impact whether or not a stimulant is going to actually address all of the symptoms that you have. So you remember in your assessment all of the physiological and physical conditions that are associated with ADHD and autism. We have the autoimmune conditions, we have allergies, we have mast cell activation syndromes, we have all the things going on with our gut, our hormones, etc. So actually investigating those things, if you have rashes that aren't explained, if you have tried food elimination diets and really still struggle with abdominal pain and constipation and diarrhea, if you are constantly congested, these types of things need really to be figured out and treated. Now we're looking at the non-stimulants. So going back to thinking about even the bruxism and rejection sensitivity and cognitive hyperactivity. 3 things that maybe stimulants could contribute to and or just not help. This is where we bring in the alpha-2 agonists. Alpha-2 agonists are actually blood pressure medication. The 2 available are clonidine and guanfacine, and they are very good for rejection sensitivity because they sort of turn the throttle back on fight, flight, freeze. They help reduce some of the norepinephrine, which is also called noradrenaline or adrenaline, right, from the limbic system, which is telling you that, you gotta fight something or run away, the fight, flight, or freeze response. And so that sort of adds a level of emotional armor. People feel like they can just let things roll off of them a little more easily when they are taking an alpha agonist. It can also help with sleep, partly because the side effects are that they are a little bit sedating, and they can help us address stimulants. The second class here of the non-stimulant medications are the norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors. So reuptake means this nerve was sending the neurotransmitter, and it hangs out, the neurotransmitters hang out in between the 2 neurons. And then once the chemical, once this one has taken up whatever it can, this one then wants to recycle and pull back in some of the neurotransmitters that haven't gone further down. And so that's reuptake. So stopping reuptake means more of that neurotransmitter stays in the synapse and perhaps will be taken up by the next neuron to keep making the action happen. So norepinephrine is how we have alertness, arousal, memory, fight, flight, freeze, and emotion. So norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors can be good for all of those things and good for mood management, potentially. We see the alpha-2 agonists. These are blood pressure medications, so they can drop your blood pressure a little bit, drop your heart rate a little bit. Maybe they're a little sedating. They can have a headache, dry mouth, nausea, dizziness, if your blood pressure's dropping. Orthostatic blood pressure, hypotension. This is if you stand up too quickly, your blood pressure drops and maybe you're a little dizzy. And with these drugs, there's a theoretical risk, at least, of if you stop the drug too quickly, you could have this rebound jump in your blood pressure. That's not really ever been super observed, but it is certainly a theoretical risk. So this is the alpha-2 agonists, clonidine and guanfacine, are ones that we would titrate up slowly and titrate back down. Really 5 days between each dose. Not too bad. And then the side effects of the Strattera and the other norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors, decreased appetite, nausea, dry mouth, sedation. So you can see every single one of these has dry mouth. That is just a fact of life when you are ADHD and you are treating it with medications, okay? You will need to request refills every month, and you want to make sure that you make a request with at least a buffer of medication on hand, so that if there's any holdups at your pharmacy, or if we are out of the office or something like that, that you don't end up asking for a refill on the day that you have run out of medications. And we cannot promise that we will be able to get those refills to you that day. That's just not a promise that we can make. And you can make requests by leaving a voicemail on the refill line on our main phone number, 608-218-4151, or ideally through the portal. Add some information in the reasoning for us, such as what pharmacy you want to use, if you want to use something different than you've used before, or any other helpful information, so that reduces back and forth communication between us. And then hit that request button and you will get a notification on whether or not we've approved that refill. Protect your medications from getting into the wrong hands. Be careful not to misplace them. Stolen meds must be reported to the non-emergency police line, and please let us know if you do that. Refills can't be provided for lost or stolen medications, unfortunately, and one visit is going to be required every 3 months for continued prescribing with us. And at least one of those visits must be in person per year. So this is about finding the right drug or drugs, the right route, because there's liquid, chewable, capsules, there's also patches. Hi, kitty. There's the right dose, and that's going to be an art to find that. And then there's the right time or timing, and timing might be something like you need a pre-awakening dose because it's brutal to get out of bed every morning. So you set an alarm for about an hour to an hour and a half before you have to be actually out of bed and functioning, and you have your pills beside your bed. You wake up at your first alarm, take your meds, go back to sleep for a bit. By the time your alarm goes off to where you have to be out of bed and functioning, your brain is online. So now it's time to talk about what medications are right for you, if any.